All right, so I think it's 12:31. We're not going to waste any more time. Let's kick things off and all right, let's go. So this week's webinar is going to deal with using standardization to unlock efficiency and deliver better results. I just want to give you a little bit of housekeeping. The structure of this webinar will be 45 minutes in total. Ishan will have about 35 minutes to chat about all things standardization and efficiency. And then hopefully, time permitting, we'll have 10 minutes at the end for questions. So please feel free to pop your questions in the chat. My colleague Enzo will gather them all up and we can go through them at the end. Ishan has assured me he is ready and prepared for all the challenging questions to come. So please don't hold back. This webinar also will be recorded, so don't panic if you feel like you've missed something. You can just rewatch the recording. The recording will be shared after this via email. The Q&A session at the end, though, will not be included in the recording. So yeah, that will be excluded. All right, so that's the housekeeping out the way. Let me just give you a little bit of a background about myself and Radiant. I am Chelsea Jackson, and I am a senior legal advisor and practice lead at Radiant Law. I oversee a broad range of accounts, from procurement accounts to remediation projects and anything in between. As I'm sure you are no doubt already aware, Radiant Law is an alternative legal service provider, so that's ALSP for short. We like to think of ourselves as contracting experts. We provide managed legal services, contracting projects, as well as legal secondments. And really, the core purpose of Radiant Law is to create great relationships. So we do this by using a balanced blend of people, processes, and technology. But that's enough about Radiant and myself. And on that note, I would really have the great pleasure of introducing you to Ishan Sellahewa. Ishan is from SA Partners, and he is a digital transformation and operational excellence leader. I know that sounds like a huge mouthful. Ishan is based in London, and he helps organizations use technology to streamline processes and drive sustainable improvement. So I want to hand over to you, Ishan. I'd love you to explain your long title. What does that mean? What does it entail? And tell us a little bit more about yourself.
Amazing. Thank you very much, Chelsea. And thank you, everybody, indeed, for joining the session today. As Chelsea mentioned, my name is Ishan. I work for SA Partners, and really, just to summarize my ridiculously wrong title, I lead digital transformation here. Pleased to be with you all today. What I'm going to be doing over the next kind of 35 to 40 minutes or so is just walking you all through how you can start to shape your organization such that you start to run on process, not on pressure. And as Chelsea was mentioning, this is all going to be looking at how you guys can use standards to unlock the efficiency within your organization. Before we jump into the details of it, just a bit of background on SA Partners. We're a change and transformation consultancy, and our fundamental belief is that excellence already exists within every organization inherently. Sometimes you just need a little bit of help to uncover and find it, because it does get hidden, right? So it might get hidden because there's no clarity on your purpose and business strategy. So you might have the most amazing people in the world, but if they're all trying to move in different directions, you're obviously not going to get the results that you want. Something else that we see is maybe your excellence is slightly hidden by the people and the behaviors within your organization. Very often, we find that amazing people within organizations who are individual contributors get promoted into leadership positions without being given the skills and the training that they need to move to become effective managers. Sometimes you just need a bit of leadership coaching to be able to unlock the excellence within your team. And the final challenge that we see, and I think we've all felt, is that as individual contributors, we've got amazing work that we want to do, but we feel like we're constrained by the processes that just add additional bureaucracy and hoops that we need to jump through. And that's really what I'm going to be talking about today, how we can improve our processes to unlock the excellence that's already within your organizations. So really, I think the thesis of my presentation today is going to be try to get you all to buy into this idea that you need to start to focus on creating and performing amazing processes. And when you do that, just trust that the results will follow. So that's kind of where I'm going to focus a lot of the time today. I am also going to, though, touch on two elements that I think are strong supporters and requirements to take a process-driven approach. One being having a clear governance and process ownership model, and the other is having clear process documentation. And really, what you find is when you get those two sorted, you're then able to build that process-driven focus. So that is kind of the game plan for the next 35 to 40 minutes. Without further ado, though, let's just jump in and start with the meat and bones of it. How do you, as an organization, start to create a process-driven focus? And before we even look at that, why is it important? So, really, for any type of organization, there are two focuses or two approaches that you can take to running your business. The first approach, and this is fundamentally the approach that most organizations take, is to be very, very outcome focused. So, when we take an outcome focused driven approach to running our organization, our key objective is making sure that our people deliver their assigned outputs. So perhaps I'm running a team of lawyers. So what I want are my lawyers to be closing off matters, to be completing projects, to be making sure that they're hitting their billable numbers, that they're hitting their utilization numbers. If I'm running a sales team, my objective is to make sure that my sales team are generating new leads, winning new business, so on and so forth. And what I'm really going to do is just focus on, are my people hitting those numbers? For this to work, what we need is individual excellence and dedication. So in our sales world, we need amazing sellers that can go to the market to find new people and to close these new companies. And they need to be dedicated as well. So for your legal team, the matters need to get closed off, the projects need to get closed off. And that might mean that we stay back at work until 8 or 9 o'clock, or maybe I need to work this Sunday. And I need my team to have that dedication to say, you know what, I am going to write off my Sunday and work so that the job gets done. From a time frame perspective, what this actually results is often short-term wins and rapid results. Because what we require and what we expect and what we really foster is telling people, break the process, just do whatever it takes to get the work done and get it out of the door right now. What this means, though, is that there is necessarily going to be a lot of variation in the quality of outputs your team produces. This might mean because some people are more senior, they're able to produce at a better rate than people that are more junior. It might mean that I need to stay back until 8 o'clock if I'm going to get this done. But you know what? I've got a personal commitment this evening and I just can't do it. So sometimes you're going to be doing really well, other times you're not. And what we find is when we take this outcome driven focus, when our teams fail to deliver the outcomes that we require of them, we start to performance manage our people, right? We start to have tough conversations with our people. And the thing about this approach is often these performance management conversations are actually pretty poor, right? It is often as simple as you didn't hit your numbers last month, you didn't hit your numbers in that last quarter. I need you to be better. You've got the number, hit it next month. And from our people's perspective, it's not a great place to be, right? Because we're needing to push our people so hard, it's ultimately going to lead to burnout and turnover. Equally, from our customers, it's not comfortable because sometimes we deliver, sometimes we don't deliver. So they've got a lot of apprehension to say, are we going to get what we need this time? So that's one example. That's one end of the spectrum where, as a business, we're going to focus on outcomes. The other end of the spectrum is we're going to run our business on process. And the whole objective with this is, as leaders within the organization, we need to give our team amazing processes that we follow, right? And over time, we're going to continue to improve these processes. We then expect that our people are simply going to follow the processes that we put in front of them. And we're going to trust that if our people follow those processes, the outputs are simply going to look after themselves. Now, for this to work, what we need are amazing processes, right? We need to make sure that we're giving the people processes that we know are fit for purpose. And then from a people perspective, we need to make sure that our people have the capability and capacity to then follow the processes that we put in front of them. From a time frame perspective, actually, in the short term, what you might find is it's not as effective as an outcome driven focus, right? Because when we take a process driven focus, what we're saying is don't break the process. I just need you to follow the process and do your job the same way. And because we don't break the process, we might not actually be successful tomorrow. But what it does mean is over time, we are going to build processes that we know are successful, that are continually improving. So this process focused approach will deliver long-term, repeatable, and consistent results. And then again, from that continuous improvement perspective, it means that we're not just staying stagnant, constantly firefighting to get the job done. We are going to be continually improving because our focus is on continually improving the process. Now, if we find ourselves in a position where our people have successfully followed the process, but we have failed to deliver the output that we need them to deliver, we're not going to have a tough conversation with our people. What we're going to do is have a tough examination of the process. We're going to use structured problem solving. We're going to improve the process so that tomorrow it is now fit for purpose. If we find ourselves in a situation where we've got a process that we know works, but we've got individuals within the organization who are struggling a little bit, rather than just telling them be better, what we're going to be doing is having coaching conversations, because all we need to do is teach them how to run the process that we know works. And therefore, from our people perspective, it actually prioritizes our people and has sustainability within our teams. Because what we'll find is if we're in a situation where the only way for this job to get done is for us to work until 8 at night or for us to work on Sundays, that is telling us that our process is broken and we need to fix it. And equally, from our customers' perspective, they are going to start to have much more confidence in us because we are reliable. We're consistently delivering results. So they know that if they make a request from us, we are going to deliver. So those are the two different ways of running an organization. The reality, like I said, is most organizations take an outcome focused approach because as leaders, we've got numbers to hit. So what we end up doing is pushing back on our team to say, I need you to hit your number for me to hit my number. But like you can see, all that's going to do is burn your team out, deliver poor results to your customers, and ultimately take a very short-term focus. So my push for you all is to say, I'm going to take the hard and challenging step to say, no, we're going to take a process-driven focus. We're going to make processes that are amazing. We're going to make sure our people follow the processes, and then we're going to just trust that the results will follow. So how do we do all of this? What I'm showing on the screen now is the SA Partners improvement journey. And this is essentially a business maturity model that's built into 3 different phases. The first phase is the reactive phase. So when organizations or teams are within the reactive phase, they typically don't have processes. They may have processes documented somewhere, but fundamentally, people just do work in their own way just to get the job done. What we find is when there's variation in the way that our teams work, there's necessarily going to be variation in the quality of outputs that our teams produce. So sometimes we are going to be meeting customer expectations. Sometimes we're going to be exceeding customer expectations, but equally at times we're going to be missing customer expectations altogether. So again, as a customer, when my supplier is in this reactive zone, it's very, very uncomfortable because I've got no idea if they're going to look after me on this instance or not. As a manager, when my teams are operating in the reactive zone, again, it's not a great place to be because a lot of my time is going to be spent fixing my team's mistakes and pacifying those upset customers. And as an employee, when we're operating in this space, it's not great because it feels like some days I'm winning, some days I'm losing, and I've got no idea why. I've got no pathway to be consistently winning. So when we're in this reactive zone, really what we need to be doing is focusing on creating standard processes that are capable of consistently delivering customer results. It's having a process that we know works. When you're in this reactive zone, really you don't even need to be worried about, is this process efficient or effective yet? All we need to be thinking about is, can this process consistently and repeatedly deliver customer results? And as you start implementing those standard processes that you know work, you're going to be starting to transition into the proactive zone. Now, when we are in the proactive zone, at this stage, we shouldn't really be thinking about what technology can we use. What we should be thinking about is, all right, well, right now we have a process that we know works. How can we make that more efficient? How can we eliminate the waste from the processes so that our people are able to do more with the same? And only then, once we have a lean, mean process that we know is fit for purpose, are we able to start thinking about being excellent? And this is where we start asking questions around, well, how can we improve and scale this process by adding best-in-class technology and AI? So that's the improvement journey. This journey applies to an organization. So as an organization, you might be anywhere on the journey, but equally it applies to a team or a process. So what you often find is maybe you've got a lot of processes in the reactive zone, but you've got a handful of teams or processes that are actually proactive or excellent. Now, going back to what we were talking about in the previous slide, so long as you take an outcome driven focus to running your organization, where you're telling your people, I don't care how you work, I just care about the results that you produce, you are going to forever live in the reactive zone. Because again, you're telling people, do whatever it takes to get the job done. They are therefore going to have variation in the way that they work, and you're going to be reactive. So the only way really to shift to become a process focused organization, to become proactive and excellent, is to shift your focus from outcome to process. So how do we actually progress through our improvement journey? The first is as simple as defining a standard. Right now, the first standard way of working that you operate probably isn't going to be the best way of working. It might not actually even be fit for purpose. But what you'll find is just by standardizing a bad process, you're going to start to minimize some of the variation in the way that you're working. That is going to remove and reduce a lot of the noise. And that will therefore give you time and space to start thinking about, all right, well, how can we actually make this process work? So first and foremost, all we're going to do is implement some sort of a standard. Once we have that baseline, once we've got ourselves a bit of time back, we can then start looking at that standard and saying, well, what changes can we now make to this process so that it can consistently and repeatedly deliver customer results? And this is now starting to use structured problem solving to say, all right, well, if we're missing the mark right now, what are the variables? What needs to be changed so that we get a process that works? Once we've reached this level of stability, we then need to monitor what's going on in the world. We need to identify where performance drops from that standard, and then we need to take a corrective action. And there's usually two reasons why performance will drop from the standard. The first and most common is as simple as we've implemented a standard, but our people have stopped following the standard. So all we need to do is have a corrective conversation to say, you've kicked off this process in a way that doesn't align with our right way of working. Can we have a chat about it and just make sure that you get it right next time? The other reason why performance can drop below that baseline is that things have changed, right? The world around us has changed. The customer expectations have changed. And therefore, the process that was fit for purpose yesterday is no longer fit for purpose today. So what we now need to do is, again, use our problem solving skills to create a new standard that works. And then finally, we can start moving towards excellence. And as I mentioned, this is now starting to say, how can we scale and improve the way that we work by using best-in-class technology? The other thing that we need to think about is how we change our approach to problem solving. So at the earlier stages of our improvement journey, we use problem solving to say something's gone wrong, why has it gone wrong, and what can we do to fix it? As we move into excellence, what we start is becoming a lot more forward looking, right? We start to say, okay, well, what might go wrong in the future? And then what solutions can we put in place today so that that problem actually doesn't occur in the first place? Right? So that's effectively how we progress through our improvement journey. One thing that I will call out is that you need to consider your target state. So when I present this model, most organizations will say, yes, that looks great. We now need to have a roadmap for how we move our entire organization to excellence. The challenge with this is when you start digging under the surface, we'll start to then have conversations to say, all right, well, what's holding us back is we've got this legacy IT system. And really, for us to move into excellence, we need to replace these 5 legacy IT systems. And then you start having the conversation to say, well, replacing 5 legacy IT systems within our organization is just not going to happen. Nobody's going to sign off on that budget. Nobody's going to sign off on those projects. So then people start to say, all right, well, nothing is going to happen. So you know what? We're not going to take any action, right? So targeting yourself at excellence is often unrealistic and it prevents action from being taken. So very often what we'll start by doing is saying, look, let's appreciate there are certain constraints, certain things that can't change that is going to prevent us from going to excellence. So actually what we need to do is just focus on being proactive right now. How can we best use the tools that we have today to consistently deliver customer results? And then once we've created that baseline, we can then reassess to say, are we just satisfied that we're going to sit here and that's fine? Or now are we in a position where we need to create business cases to make more substantial changes? So remember, you're always going to have more opportunities to improve than you have resources. So you just need to think about, does it actually make sense to take part of my business to excellence while everybody else is in reactive, or do we start just bringing the whole organization up slowly? So that's a bit of the theory behind it. I hope that made sense. What I do want to do is just bring a bit of color to that journey and take you on my coffee adventures. So as many of you might have picked up, I do have a slight Australian accent. I grew up in Australia. I've been in the UK for 6 years now. And one of the things that struck me when I first moved over is how truly terrible the coffee was over here. I will admit that over the last 6 to 7 years that I've been here, it has improved a lot. But when I first landed here, I thought, all right, I can't keep buying £4 coffees that taste like garbage. I need to take matters into my own hands. So I started getting into V60 coffee making. It's pretty simple. You've just got the cone that you can see. There's a filter. You put the coffee grounds in the filter, pour water in it, and then it drips out into, in my case, I just had a cup underneath. So I started making my coffee. What I found was some mornings I made my coffee and it was fine, right? I was pretty happy. I was satisfied. Other mornings I made my coffee. Same approach, coffee in the filter, water on top, drips underneath, and it was incredible, right? It was better than anything that I could find in any cafe. But equally, other mornings when I made my coffee, it just wasn't great. And what was interesting is when my coffee wasn't great, there wasn't any consistency as to why it wasn't great, right? So some mornings it was really, really bitter and dark and harsh. Other mornings it was really sour or the mouthfeel tasted off. So really every morning it was just all over the shop. There was a lot of variation in the quality of output that my simple process was producing. What I found was while I thought I had just one simple process that I did every day, there were actually nuances and variations that was producing this variation. So at this point, I was living in a share house, and what that meant was we didn't have 6 of the same mug, right? It was just an eclectic collection of mugs that had been left by housemates over the decades that house has been in existence. This is the standard mug that I used, but often either we hadn't done the washing the night before, or maybe one of my other housemates had taken the mug before I made my coffee. So if that wasn't available, I used my island mug. When I put them next to each other, you can see there's a pretty substantial size difference. Now, as I was building out this deck, I thought, all right, well, we should probably be a bit scientific. I wonder actually what's the difference in quantity. So I measured it, and what you can see is that my standard mug over there was 300 mils, and my island mug came in at a whopping 500 mils. So big differences in the amount of coffee that I was making. Now, as I mentioned, the first step in my process was to take a scoop of coffee, grind it, and then that goes in the filter. But not all scoops are the same, right? So sometimes I might have the scoop just about filled up. Other times, maybe I'm a bit more generous and it's just a bit over the line. Again, it doesn't seem like a huge difference, but I measured it. And what I found was that slightly smaller scoop was about 10 grams of coffee. And the larger scoop where I piled it up, that's almost 18 grams of coffee. So if we put all of this together, some mornings I had 10 grams of coffee in my 300 ml mug. Other mornings I had 18 grams of coffee in my 500 ml mug. But then sometimes I did this, and other times I did this. So I thought I had a standard process, grind the coffee in the filter, water over, but really there was a huge amount of variation. And that is the reason why this happened. So I started progressing on my journey. First and foremost, I needed to define a standard, right? At this point, I had no idea what the actual best process was because I was all over the shop, right? It was impossible for me to get it right the first time, but I applied a little bit of logic, right? I knew it was silly to put 10 grams of coffee into the big 500 ml mug. So I just came up with something that felt about right. So I started with 17 grams of coffee in 250 mils of water. I had to make a small investment at this point. So I did buy myself some scales. As you can see, this is my Amazon invoice that came in at just under £12, but it did make the world a difference. From here, every morning, my coffee now tasted the same, day in, day out. It wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it tasted the same. And the problems that I had with that cup were the same day in, day out. And that level of stability now allowed me to do structured problem solving to work out what is the best recipe. And from that, I was able to get myself to a point where I realized that, well, actually, the best standard cup is 20 grams of coffee and 275 mils of water. And that's kind of what I landed on. It was a consistent cup that was consistently delivering results morning after morning after morning. Over time, though, I did find that occasionally my coffee didn't taste quite as good as it usually does. So I needed to identify that and I needed to do something about it. The main reason is as simple as I got lazy, right? I've done this so many times now, hundreds and hundreds of coffees. If you give me a scoop and a bag of beans, I can just blind pick it up and I'll be in and around 20 grams. So I got out of the habit of weighing it. So I needed to come back to the drawing board and say, you know what? We've got a process that works. Don't be lazy. Weigh your coffee. Don't skip steps. But equally, I started to realize that, all right, I'm still following the process day in, day out, but I'm getting to a point where actually it's not as good as it used to be. So I needed to do structured problem solving. What I found was I had been assigned to a client that needed me on site kind of Tuesday to Thursday every week, right? And what this meant was over the course of a week, I usually have about 2 coffees a day. Rather than having 14 cups of coffee over the course of a week, I'm now having, maybe 5 or 6. So my bag of beans was lasting a lot longer than it used to do. The coffee was getting old, and that was the root cause of this problem. So what I needed to do was create a new standard, and that new standard was when I got a bag of coffee, half of it went in the fridge, half of it in the freezer, sorry, and the other ones I use. So again, I've just iterated the process to change to suit my new conditions. That's where I'm at. I can now start to be a bit more forward-looking and say, all right, well, how can we leverage technology to make things even better? Without boring you with too many coffee details, effectively for me to really scale this new approach, what I would need is a new grinder, right? A better grinder, use best-in-class technology to make sure that my grounds are even. But that brings me back to what my target state should be, right? So right now my coffee is here, but coffee isn't the only culinary challenge that I have in my life. Right now, I'm making my pizza by just chucking it in the oven, right? Now, if I'm going to spend £500 on kitchen equipment, rather than taking my coffee to excellence, what I realize is I'm actually better off investing in a pizza oven so that now both my coffee and my pizza making are in that state of stability where it is controlled and I'm happy with it. And this is going to be the same in all of your processes as well, right? You're always going to have a limited amount of time and capital to invest. Do you really need to get everything to excellence or one of your processes to excellence while everything else is in the red squiggly line? Or do we try and stabilize across the board? So some of the lessons that I learned from here is you just need to start by understanding your variation, right? You think that you might have a standard process, but get into the details, understand where the variation is, and then just create a standard stable process. From that standard stable process, you start improving. Think about what small investments you can make. So rather than ripping up a new system and spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds, what is your 11-pound set of weighing scales, right? What are those small tweaks that you can make that will make a huge difference? And then again, as you saw me go through the journey, you stabilize, you collect data, and you improve. So what I hope I have tried to get your head around there is why it really makes sense to take a process-driven focus to running your organization, and then how you can go through the improvement journey to do that. The reality is, though, for this to work, you need to have strong process governance and ownership. So this is the governance model that we implement in our transformation journeys at SA Partners. You need to have an executive sponsor. The executive sponsor is all about building the culture. It's saying that within our organization, we are process driven. We value leaders who can create standard processes that we know work. We value employees that are able to follow and improve that standard process. You need to have group owners. These group owners own groups of processes, as the title suggests, and they are responsible for making sure that across their team, across their department, we've got the standard processes in place. You've got process owners. These are individuals who own individual processes. They need to make sure that their specific process is in place, it's effective, and they're responsible for taking that process through the improvement journey. And then our process participants need to simply follow the process. One thing and this is just kind of how you might overlay your governance structure there. One thing that I will call out, though, is that you are more than a document owner when you're a process owner or a process group owner. Your responsibility is to train out the new process. You need to observe, are people following the new process? You need to coach people on how to follow and perform that new process. And finally, when they don't follow the process, you need to have a corrective conversation with them. There are really two types of processes, right? Some are processes that we inherently follow, right? You walk into McDonald's, you know that if you go to the counter and say, I know there are kiosks, but I want to order with you and I want you to deliver my Big Mac to the table over there, they're going to just tell you to go away. So you know that this is a process that I need to follow. But equally, there are other processes in place in the world that we know or we believe have been created for bureaucracy and we don't actually need to follow. So this is the UK Highway Driving Code. The reality is, before you get in the car, you should be checking every day that your vehicle is correctly taxed and insured. If you don't have a hands-free kit, you need to be turning your phone off, right? None of us, touch wood, actually do this, right? I don't anyway. I just say that's been created by a government bureaucrat. My insurance is fine. I'm going to get on with my day. So as a process owner, it's your responsibility to help people overcome this transition point And a big part of that responsibility is making sure that the people within your team, within the organization, understand that the process that you've implemented is not window dressing. It's a process that matters. It's a process that you expect to follow. Right? So again, really that's your responsibility, whether you're a group owner or a process owner. You need to take your process through the improvement journey, and a big part of that is by building a culture where people understand that this matters. We're not documenting processes for the sake of it. The final thing I just want to touch on is, for any of this to work, you do need to think about how you're presenting process information back to your business. And before I get into that, let's just think about what it means to be an asset, right? If you ask most organizations, what are their assets? They're going to say things like, it's our office equipment, it's our physical machinery, it's our brand, it's our trademark. And ultimately, it's something that generates economic value for our organization today and tomorrow. And equally, we understand and appreciate that for our assets to continue to add value tomorrow, we need to do maintenance and improve them today. So we are going to service the tractor. We are going to improve our brand. What you need to start doing is building that culture where people see your processes also as assets. And if our processes are assets, we then understand that we need to follow them. We need to improve them. Now, to make your processes assets, we need to ensure that they are documented, right? So long as your processes live in the heads of your team members, they don't belong to your organization, they belong to the people within your teams. So we need to put it down on paper so that they belong to the organization, and then they can be continued to be improved as assets and continue to add value over time. There are a few different ways of doing that. What I'm showing you now is the approach that we take using a product called an in-text process manager. And so this is how we do it again in our transformation journeys. I'll very quickly walk you through how we do this. Really, it doesn't matter the tool that you use. What I want you to get from this is the thinking behind how we present process information back to the users of it. The first is we need to make it really, really easy for people to find the processes that are relevant to them. So in this demo, you can see that I'm a finance manager. I therefore then need to be able to very quickly see the processes that are relevant to me personally. So being able to drill down and say, all right, well, here are now the 5 or 6 processes that I do in my day job as a finance manager. So even though we might have 1,000 processes across the organization, here are the 5 or 10 that are relevant to me personally. You also need to have a way of presenting to your organization your end-to-end process taxonomy. So everything that you do as an organization, and then overlay that governance that we spoke about. So you need to be able to drill down. Over here, what I've done is I've drilled down into the HR group, and we can start drilling down into the journey. So right now, I might just need to know, how do I recruit? I now see my recruitment end-to-end. When you're building out these end-to-ends, don't be creating them as one process. That's a big mistake that a lot of people make. They'll create recruitment as one massive end-to-end process that just contains all the information that you have, and then you push it back on your process participants to work out what is and what isn't relevant. As you can see, the way that I've structured my recruitment end-to-end here is not as one process, rather as 4 individual sub-processes. And that allows me as a process participant to say, right now, I've had approved a recruit. I just need to know, how do you advertise? And then when you create your processes, what I want you to start thinking about is layering your process information. So processes should be made up of activities. Activities tell us what we do, and they are assigned to swim lane participants. When you click on an activity, you should then see tasks, which tell us how you do the activity. And then attached to tasks, you can see that you have your work instructions and links to websites. Again, process governance needs to be built in. So every process needs to have a named process owner who's responsible for taking this specific process through the improvement journey and holding people to account. Okay. So really, that's what I wanted to cover off with you today. I know we went slightly over the time there, but we're right about at the end. So fundamentally, to summarize, for your organization, what I recommend is stop focusing on the outputs that your people produce Shift your focus on giving your people amazing processes, coach your people on following and performing those processes, and then trust that the output will look after themselves. And for you to do this, you need to think about two enablers. One is having strong process governance to support all this, and the other is having clear and effective process documentation. If you want more information on this, we have a guide on excellence in process. I believe the Radiant team will be sending out a link to this. Otherwise, there's a QR code which you can take there. But with that, that's everything that I had for you today. So maybe, Chelsea, I'll hand back over to you to see if we've got any questions before we close off.
Great, thank you so much, Ishan. Let's just check if there are any questions. Otherwise, I do have a question for you. So while we're gathering that info, I'm so glad that I was able to hear this presentation, Ishan, because your coffee journey is so relatable, and it makes it so incredibly clear. You know, processes, we can so often get bogged down in the weeds about where do we begin, who needs to be involved, and why should we even follow it. But I think, you know, putting it towards making your coffee every day was just so obvious, and it made the process so clear. So thank you for sharing that. Just my one question is, you know, you've obviously worked with very many teams trying to help improve delivery and outputs, and obviously by improving processes. But what have you found has been the most common reason that organizations' processes actually break down?
I think it is that human element, right? So if I just come back to this slide over here, it is process owners not holding people to account. People think that we need to run this mapping workshop, we need to document the process, it's documented, job done, I'm now going to go off and keep working the way that I want to work. And then all that work gets lost. So what really makes or breaks is firstly creating that standard process, but then having your process owner look and see, are people following it? And then having corrected conversations when they don't. And it's also then building a culture where we would prefer somebody to follow the process and fail, because that then gives us an opportunity to improve, versus somebody break the process, go their own way, but get the job done this time. Because if they do that, they're going to get it wrong next.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. Ishan, sorry, I just see someone's popped a question in here. I just want to check if it's a question or if it's a comment. Um, uh, No, I think it's just more of a comment. But I think we are out of time. So if anybody else has any other questions, you are welcome to reach out to us directly. We can put you in touch with Ishan or provide you with the links as Ishan shared previously. But we are so grateful, Ishan, for your time, and I'm sure everyone can agree that there's a lot of work to do in terms of processes, and I think everyone can find a few gaps to plug. So thanks for sharing that knowledge, and thank you everybody for attending this webinar. We really do appreciate it, and we will share the recording straight after this via an email. Thanks, everyone.